So LSU football got some bad news on the recruiting front, but could some recent college football news mean that better recruiting news is on the horizon for the Tigers?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and all of our recruiting content is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, will join us to break down the latest and Locked On, in LSU recruiting, 2 decommitments at one very important position. All right, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And joining us on a special recruiting edition of Locked On LSU is Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, and all of our recruiting breakdowns are brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, a lot to get to. A lot that happened over the weekend in college football, but I want to start in-house at LSU. The one position group that you and I have been talking about all season long, the one position group that gives me nightmares, continues to give me even more nightmares because LSU just lost their second cornerback recruit in the 2024 class. Cait Bates, 4-star corner, top 10 recruit at that position from the state of Florida, has decided to decommit from LSU. Before we get into what that means for LSU next season, any insight, since you know the state of Florida so well, on why he has decided to decommit from LSU? Is it more about LSU, or is it more about himself and what he wants for himself and for his college experience?
I know Kai pretty well, and I'll actually see him Friday, so I'll get more scooped in. But for now, I think it's more LSU not being able to cover anybody. He was really high on them when he got ready to commit. And right after he committed, he liked the idea of going away from home, but still being in the SEC footprint. It was the happy medium across the board. But of course, his expectations were a little different based on what I had heard from him directly.
Mine too.
I think that's a pretty big consensus across the college football land. So obviously they've had some things they can't control, like Brooks and stuff like that, but they still can't cover anybody and they can't tackle anybody back there in clutch moments. It's just true. So like the young man that lives where you do in Nashville that decommitted, he decided to pull away from LSU. I can't really say I blame him, but they got to make a defense coordinator change, in my opinion, or this is just going to expand beyond the DB board. So there's a couple of kids they got to get in state too. They're not going to get right now otherwise.
Ondre Evans, the 4-star corner from Nashville, decommitted from LSU about a month or so ago, committed to Georgia. And I look Georgia as a program is in a much better place. Georgia's defense is in a much better place. I can't necessarily blame them. But Brian, this is the frustrating thing to me is it's not just about having a bad defense this year, because that in and of itself is frustrating. You could be a college football playoff contender had your defense just been a little bit better. But it's also the effect that that has in this upcoming recruiting class and your reputation as what used to be known as a defensive powerhouse is now almost the joke of college football because their defense is just so bad.
Yeah, I don't think any defensive recruit is going to like that. There's a lot of moxie with the kids that walk in the door that play defense at an Alabama and LSU and A&M, something like that. When I go to a combine or something, before I even know the jersey numbers and who's who, I usually know who the defensive guys are by the way they carry themselves. It's a little different. It's the guy at the bar that your mom would have never wanted you to date. That's the defensive lineman and the cornerback. But they also don't want to go somewhere that's not appreciated. Right now at LSU, I mean, and I love Jaden Daniels, but somebody going to make a tackle back there? I mean, you know, mix one in
No,
occasionally.
haven't seen that.
Yeah, I think it is hurting. And again, they've lost a couple kids in state. Wardell Mack just committed to Texas. He decommitted from Florida, who obviously LSU just depantsed on national TV. But he didn't flip to LSU. He flipped to Texas. How many New Orleans kids go to Texas?
Not very many.
LSU is just losing corners everywhere. They're bleeding cornerbacks. And it's so bizarre because that's always been the school that you think of with DBs and cornerbacks in particular. So I don't know what to tell you, Caroline, until they change something on the staff and probably multiple, it's not going to be very good on defensive recruiting.
So LSU right now in the 2024 class has 3 cornerback commits, which you and I both know, and listeners know that's not enough. You've got 3 in-state kids, 1 4 stars, the 22nd ranked cornerback in the country, and Juwan Johnson, and then Wallace Foster and Bernard Causey, both 3 stars. We know that's not enough. We know that LSU needs more corners, and we know that Brian Kelly wants to start eventually transitioning in playing young players, developing young homegrown talent. You can't do that if you're constantly fishing players out of the transfer portal. But looking at those three commits, where it stands right now, how solid do you think their commitments are? And how much do you think they could contribute to LSU in the 2024 season?
Having the in-state kids committed, it's pretty rare that they flip. About the only school in the last 10 years that's had any success at that is the obvious, Alabama.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're after any of the 3 right. I could be wrong. I don't think they're after any of those 3, so they should be good. And of course, the guy that we always make fun of on this show finally got fired, and Jimbo Fisher. He's had some success there, but they should be good. Juwan Johnson, I know, great kid, very intelligent. That's a kid I think could play early. Be a nickel, whatever. He played quarterback for his high school. He's played all kinds of things. I think he would be the most likely to play early, but it's corner. And I still think the guys on the roster, once they're healthy, I mean, they have been besieged. Yeah. Like it has just gone south. Like at some point it's comical. Like this guy's sick or this guy's got an ankle, whatever it is. It's always something. They're going to have guys back. They'll have some new pieces on the staff, I would imagine. That'll get better. But you would hope one of those guys can play, but they still need to either take a JUCO kid or at least one portal kid that can come in and play right away. You want a guy that's a little older. You don't want to rely on no freshman. And I know they got some kids coming that are pretty good back on the roster, but at some point you just got to kind of wonder, like, okay, even though these guys have been ranked high, it's not working. Whether it's injuries or not, you need some new faces. So they may need to somehow, some way flip somebody last minute after they make a staff change. I don't know. I don't know how you sell it right now. And signing day is December 20th. It's just the timing for that is horrific for LSU, which it's always that way when you got to make a coaching change for any school. But can they get it done? Possibly. I still think this year, though, I know you don't like it and Kelly probably doesn't either. They're going to have to hit the portal for at least one kid. That's my guess.
And if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Everybody's got to play until they get smacked in the mouth. But coming up next, I want to get into a name that you just mentioned and what that could potentially mean for LSU. We'll get into that coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, is with us. And of course, like it is every week, all of our recruiting content is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That is why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So, Brian, you mentioned it. We learned on Sunday morning that Texas A&M's parting ways with Jimbo Fisher. Now, when things were getting rocky for A&M a few weeks ago after the losses to Tennessee, to Alabama, when it seemed very clear that Texas A&M's goals this year would not be realized, they had some players decommit, and LSU was able to flip a couple of Texas A&M recruits. But now that Jimbo is officially out, I expect a good bit of players to probably decommit from Texas A&M, reopen their commitment, and being in the same recruiting area, whether it's Texas or LSU. How do you see this as an opportunity for LSU to be able to take advantage of some players that might be looking for a program with a little bit more stability right now?
A little bit. I mean, LSU's got problems, but I don't even know what to define A&M at over the last 5-6 years. I think there's 2 or 3 guys they'll try to get, but there could be more. A&M's class is really good. They got a kid out of Louisiana just about every year for Lord only knows how long. So looking at it from a long-standing perspective, LSU's got rid of a guy like Fisher knew LSU because he was there when Nick was at LSU, so he knows the state. That's good for them. But I think they're even going to be able to get a couple Texas kids they wouldn't normally get, depending on who A&M. I mean, they're going to drop a bag of money that's insane. Did you see the check? They did the halftime presentation. Did you hear about that?
$160 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's to the point there is no, I mean, it's just how much oil do you want is what this really is. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. So that being stated, it depends on the coach or coaches, the timing of it. There's a lot of little intricacies. But if that goes good for LSU, meaning it drags out because it takes a little time to get to know a guy, you could see a couple more guys flip just out of the state of Texas. Even if you just added 1 or 2 more guys that are 4 or 5-star players in this class, I mean, LSU's going to finish with the top 10 class again. You'd be at least headed in the right direction. I don't see how they don't benefit more, though, long-term. Because Jimbo, like him or not, the one thing he always did, for whatever reason, that guy loved recruiting. He was on the phone constantly. Most coaches hate it. Jimbo liked it. So that's going to help because Brian Kelly was not on that kind of level recruiting-wise. And although his staff makes up for it to a certain degree, it's still one less guy to compete against.
You look at players like Harold Perkins, Texas kids, formerly committed to Texas A&M that LSU was able to flip. And that was a commitment to Texas A&M when, Jimbo Fisher's job didn't seem like it was in as much flux, obviously, as it was this season. So I'm looking at that as being a potential gold mine for LSU. But there's one school in that state that wears burnt orange and white that I think might have something to say about that.
Texas is probably going to eat Texas A&M's lunch in recruiting the next month or so, I'd imagine.
Oh.
They're a little more stable, Caroline.
When one team is going up and one team is going down, each at kind of a rapid pace, those things seem to happen.
That's right. So I'm sure I'll enjoy the carnage either way.
It's just, we're just here for the chaos. Here for the chaos.
That's what college football is good for.
That's what this past entire weekend of football was. Just absolute freaking chaos. And I'm here for it. That's why we love the sport. Coming up next, maybe some better news. Some better news for potential LSU recruiting over the next few classes and what that could mean for the future of the most important position in all of football. We'll get into that coming up next. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders. I'm looking at a potential CJ Stroud over on passing yards because, my goodness, CJ Stroud has just been unstoppable the past couple of weeks. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. Again, that is FanDuel.com/locked-on to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet for new FanDuel customers. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. All of the conversation, really a lot of the conversation this season, but especially after the performance on Saturday night against Florida. All of the talk around the college football space has been about Jayden Daniels. It's been about how electric he's been this season. It's been about he deserves the Heisman Trophy. And it's been about how, I don't want to say miraculous because that's not a fair word, but how impressive his development from 2022 to 2023 has been. Jayden Daniels was very good in 2022. He won the SEC West. He was not nearly as good as he is now. What do you think effect could that have on future quarterbacks in the 25, 26 classes and beyond, looking at the quarterback development that LSU has made in recent history?
As long as they keep Mike Denbrock around, I think they're in good shape. He's the offensive coordinator that Brian Kelly has worked with multiple times, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, etc. And I tell you what, this is a great situation because the passing game is flourishing. It's a fun way they do it because they throw bombs. You know LSU is going to have receivers. That's never really been a problem. Now, if you're a quarterback, I mean, Colin Hurley, a kid I know, I'm sure he's loving it. But anybody that comes in down the road, it's the same kind of deal. I'm not going to pick any names or anything specific, but any quarterback that is offered by LSU that doesn't take it seriously, I kind of wonder how serious they are because they've proven it. Now, the other thing with that is once you get quarterbacks lined up, the other stuff falls into place. So yes, Caroline, it is absolutely huge. And if I remember correctly, it's so big what Daniels did. He's the only guy to throw for over 300 and rush for over 200 in a college football game ever.
In the history of college football.
So that's a good stat. That's a good stat.
Yeah, it's good to have. And especially looking at, adding on top of what Jayden Daniels has done, what Joe Burrow did. His 2018 season, his first year at LSU, good, not elite, comes back in 2019. And that's, of course, a different coaching staff. But still, the development under that staff turned him from kid at Ohio State that could barely keep a job to Heisman Trophy winner and first overall pick. So I think that having not just Jayden Daniels as the one-off, but looking at potentially two Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks in the matter of 4 seasons, it's really impressive. And especially when LSU is able to get quarterbacks, maybe like a Bryce Underwood in the 2025 class, a 5-star quarterback who's getting offers from everyone. Hey, LSU is now a place where quarterbacks want to go. Maybe under the Les Miles regime, maybe under the Ed Orgeron regime before Joe Burrow. That wasn't necessarily the case.
Here's a little something with that. Carter Smith just committed to Michigan, and he's a quarterback out of Florida. That's a big-time quarterback. So the competition for LSU seems to have already found their quarterback in the class of 25. So that's an interesting little development, and that's one less team they're probably going to have to compete with. And it's home state U. So it's kind of interesting. But I think LSU's in a good spot in general. Again, it's not hard to recruit to LSU. We've talked about the Saturday night factor before. Death Valley is a very special place. You haven't been there for a game on a Saturday night. I strongly urge that you do so. And I think a lot of recruits look at it the same way. So offensive capabilities are just going up. It's not going to be very hard to sign a kid when you can just throw a flyer out there and say, how many guys have done this before? And it's 300 and 200 in a game. There's one of those guys. It was happening right there at LSU. Yeah, that's not a hard one. That's not a hard one.
All right, Brian Smith, you are the very best. Always appreciate your insight. Where can the people find some more of your work?
at FBScout_Florida on X, formerly known as Twitter. This is the time of year that it's fun, Caroline, unless you're an LSU fan hoping for good news with cornerback recruiting. But if I find out anything, I will text you the best news I can. No promises, but only upwards from here for LSU's corner recruiting, I would imagine. So they've got some good kids, but they need some more. But I'm hoping that I have some good news for you fairly soon, though. I have a feeling the A&M situation, by the way, is going to bear fruit for the Tigers within the next couple of weeks.
I am keeping my fingers crossed. And whenever that news does come out, Brian, you're the first person that I'm going to call. Brian Smith, appreciate you.
All right. Thank you very much, Caroline.
All right. Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, we'll continue to look ahead at what LSU football needs to do to get a win over Georgia State. Also, more Heisman buzz for Jaden Daniels. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On 24/7 around the clock, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel.